Hey kindergarten, it's Mrs. Sharani from the Syracuse Academy of Science and Citizenship. How are you guys today? I hope you're doing really well. So on Monday, we learned about George Washington and his friend, and they did something clever. Do you remember what it was? Yeah, remember they tricked they tricked the British Army and they won the American Revolution, which was so exciting. And I remember that George Washington was considered very honest, very brave, very clever. He was considered a good man. And today we're going to learn a little bit more about him. And this will be the last day that we learn about George Washington. And then on Monday, we're going to learn about somebody named Thomas Jefferson. So we're studying all of these very important people in our country, or who founded our country, I should say, the United States of America. And that's what our big unit is all about, the United States of America. So our last day to talk about George Washington, and then we'll start learning about some other very important presidents. So today, listen out for a story about George Washington's spectacles, which is just another word for glasses. And his glasses help him to lead others to take his side. Well, it's kind of strange, so listen out for that. And by the end of today's story, you will be able to draw where George Washington lived, and then write one thing you learned about George Washington. And this one thing you learned might be what these classes had to do with helping our country. It's kind of silly. And I do want to say, today we're going to read about real quickly, about one of Washington's enslaved people. And we'll learn more about enslaved people in a few lessons, in 2 lessons from now. And during this time when George Washington was alive, slavery was widely accepted, but we know now that that was terrible. It was terribly wrong. So we'll learn a little bit more about that in a couple of lessons, but I just wanted you to be aware that it is going to come up briefly in today's lesson. So let's begin. Get nice and cozied up. And maybe you want to sit with your hands under your chin, or laying down, or crisscross applesauce, or maybe you want to stand up and watch. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. Okay, here we go. George Washington. Sometimes even close friends can disagree with one another. But even when you disagree, it helps to remember that the other person is your friend. Friends are people with whom you can disagree while you still trust and like one another. Here is a true story about friendship and trust between a group of soldiers and their general, George Washington. In this story, George Washington uses his spectacles, his glasses right there, to help him talk to his friend. How do you think he's going to use these spectacles to help him talk to his friend? I don't really know. Let's keep reading to find out. George Washington's enslaved person, Billy Lee, was worried. He had never before seen such a look as this one on Washington's face. Billy thought, for the first time, General Washington looks old. It's this hard war he's been fighting, I guess, but he has never looked like this. So how is he feeling right now? He looks pretty discouraged, pretty sad, pretty tired. Billy was right. George Washington was so tired. Before the war, George Washington had been known for his strength and his bravery. On horseback, he could jump over logs or fences that were too risky for other horsemen, and he could bend an iron horseshoe with his bare hands. For 8 years now, Washington had led the Continental Army, trying to free America from having to follow the orders of the King of Great Britain. All this time, although he became more and more tired, Washington had seemed like a man whose courage would always be strong. With Washington leading them, his soldiers kept going even when they lost some battles, or when they did not have enough food or blankets during freezing cold winters. Finally, Washington had led them when they defeated the biggest army the British king had sent to fight against them. Defeated means that they won the victory. Now George Washington was not only tired, but also restless. That means he was kind of bored. You guys might be getting restless at your houses right now. That's how George Washington was feeling. He thought, how strange. We defeated our enemies, but now my friends may ruin everything I have worked for. Why would he think his friends are going to ruin everything? I don't really know. Let's keep reading. See the next photo. Oh, same photo we saw before. Washington picked up some papers from his desk and slipped them into his pocket. He asked them impatiently, "Where are my spectacles, Billy?" Billy handed him the reading glasses Washington had been using only a week before. So George Washington had been wearing some glasses because he was getting older and his eyesight was getting worse. Some people, even younger people, wear glasses. I wear glasses, so during the daytime, most of the time, I wear contacts in my eyes to help me see. But when I take them out at the nighttime, then I have to put on my glasses or I cannot see anything at all. It would be so hard for me to walk. I'd walk into walls because I have really bad eyesight. So that's how George Washington was feeling. He couldn't see and he had to wear glasses and they didn't have contacts back then. Keep reading. Placing them in his coat pocket, Washington went outside where a soldier had his horse ready. Billy watched the general and the soldier ride away. They didn't have cars. Soon they reached a large building where Washington dismounted. That means he got off of his horse. Handing the reins of his horse to the soldier, Washington entered the building through a side door. He could hear the loud voice of General Horatio Gates, he's right here on the stage, who was a very important officer in the army. General Gates thought that he, not Washington, should be the army's chief. Now General Gates was trying to convince the other soldiers to change the way their new nation, the United States of America, would work. Oh no, this is not what George Washington wanted. He's probably feeling very upset right now. And Gates was trying to lead the soldiers to think the way that he did. So he was trying to manipulate them. Washington wanted to stop this from happening. He thought, I hope I'm not too late, as he stepped onto the stage where General Gates was standing. Oh, there he is right here. This looks like a nice colored pencil drawing. Kind of looks like colored pencil to me. Facing the stage were many soldiers who had been with Washington through the long, dangerous war. When they saw him, they gasped in surprise. Can you all gasp? Why has he come? They wondered. General Gates was surprised too, and he left the stage. Washington looked out at the soldiers he knew so well. Remember, he had led these people, so he was friends with them. The soldiers were his friends. They were almost like his students, and he was the classroom teacher, kind of like that. Lost my spot. General Gates was surprised too and left the stage. Washington looked out at the soldiers he knew so well. They looked angry, he thought. He was right. For years, these soldiers had been away from home, risking their lives to win the American Revolution so that they and their families and their friends would be free to start a new country. So these soldiers were feeling frustrated. The soldiers missed their families, but they knew this was important work, so they had kept at it. George Washington had led them the whole time. Now they had defeated or beat the largest group of British soldiers yet. Some of Washington's friends were meeting with British leaders to end the war. But Washington thought the British still have one army left, Until they signed the paper agreeing that we are free to begin our own country, they could change their minds and attack us again. We have to make sure the war is really, really over before we all go home. Well, it seems like the war was over, but it needed to be finalized or finished. But while was all happening, something else had not happened. The new American government had not paid the soldiers in a long time. Some soldiers have been unpaid for as many years as you have been alive, so like 5, 6 years. Now, some of them, led by General Gates, were mumbling, so they were like, blah, 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 mumbling. Maybe we should take over this new country. Then we know we'll be paid. We have our guns. We could make everyone do what we want them to do. No, do you think this is a good idea? No. George Washington had heard about this. He thought, I am so proud of being a soldier, but I do not want soldiers to use their guns to tell other people what to do. That would be no better than the old king of rule of a monarchy or a king. Remember, that's what they didn't want. They didn't want to have a king. We want a country in which the people decide what to do, not kings or queens or our armies. I will work to make sure my soldiers get paid. But first, I must stop them from trying to take over our government. Uh-oh. Washington took out some of the papers he had brought along and began to read them aloud. When he finished, no one cheered or clapped. I failed, he thought. They are so angry, they won't even listen to me. Then he remembered something. Wait, he told his soldiers. I have one more paper to read you. What it's going to be. He took out that paper, but the writing was so small than any of the other papers that he could not see it clearly. He held it away from himself like this, trying to read. Then closer, and then he put it closer and closer, but nothing helped. What do you think he could do? Maybe get his spectacles. Let's see. Then, to the soldiers' surprise, Washington took out the spectacles that had never before been used by him. Fumbling to open them, Washington said, Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have not only grown gray, but almost blind in service of my country. In that moment, the soldiers felt ashamed. They remembered how strong George Washington had always been and how he had always helped them. Like Billy Lee, they thought, he has worn himself out fighting for our freedom. He has given up as much as we have. Many of the soldiers were so ashamed that they began to cry. They told one another, if George Washington can wait a little longer to get paid, then we can too. He is right. The important thing is to make sure we can start a country in which the people work together to help make decisions, not just a king or a queen or an army. So who would have thought putting on his glasses would help so much? We'll talk about it at the end. A few more pictures. But the words written on those pages had not done. Washington had done by putting on his spectacles. The soldiers agreed to do as he asked, and later they did get paid. That's good. Washington did what he said he was going to do. That is it, showing integrity and honesty. A few years later, after the war was over, and Americans were choosing the president of the United States of America, people knew who they could trust. They asked George Washington to become the first president. We need you just a little while longer, they told him, not as a general, but as our president. And as always, when the American people needed him, George Washington said yes. So I want to quick summarize this story for you, and then we'll go through and make sure we can get our journal completed. So this was a long story, but before the war, George Washington was known for his strength, his bravery, right? And then after the war, he became tired and older, and he was losing his sight. And the soldiers wanted to take over the country because they hadn't gotten paid, and they wanted the power to do whatever they wanted to do. George Washington did not think this was a good idea. He didn't like the thought of it. So when he put on his so he went and he gave them a speech, right, to try and change their minds. And then when he put on his glasses, it made the soldiers realize that he too was working hard, and he too lost a lot in the war, just like they had. So it made the soldiers trust George Washington again, which was good for him. So here is our journal for the day. Draw where George Washington lived. Now, in this story, I can't really recall if it's told us where he lived, But I do know that George Washington lived in Virginia, and then he lived in Pennsylvania. Maybe just make up your own house that George Washington lived in. That's cool. Use your imagination, because he did live on a farm. We knew that, right? We knew he lived on a big farm with his dad where that cherry tree was. So maybe you want to draw that. And now let's write something you learned about George Washington. What's one thing you learned about him? I know one important fact that I learned is that George Washington was the first, I'll fix it for us, was the first president of the United States. That is a very, very important fact, right? He was the very first president of the United States. And now we know why, because people trusted him because he was so honest. So that's why. All right, guys. We learned a lot of information about George Washington in the past 4 lessons, didn't we? So on Monday, we're going to read about Thomas Jefferson, which might be a brand new name for many of you, but we'll learn why he was so important to the United States of America. So come back on Monday to find out. I can't wait to see your journal responses. So many of you have been sending me pictures on Dojo and posting them to Google Classroom. I love it. Please keep doing that because I love seeing them so much. I miss you guys. Have a really nice weekend. Bye.